So we now have a challenger for Magnus Carlsen, and so I decided to pick a game of his from his last World Championship match. I'll be honest, it's not a spectacular game. However, it does look into his style. It's Magnus' style when he plays. A lot of times he takes advantage of small mistakes. He likes to go for positions with a little bit of an edge, and there's a lot of ways to go wrong. You have to be pretty sharp. So whoever's playing him in the World Championship match has to defend and be very precise, in my opinion, to have a good chance. So this is a game from the last World Championship match against Vishy Anand. It's the fourth game of their match. They were tied 1.5 apiece. And Magnus was white, and he went for his typical small edge type of position, not super theoretical. But I'm going to be asking a lot of times during this game, guess the move or predict a move, or I want to hear some suggestions, because there often will be a lot of ways to go wrong, and the game changes dramatically. So e4, c5. Magnus is white, Vishy black, knight f3, e6. So I think black was planning to play the timing off Sicilian with knight c6 next move. That was a guess. That was fashionable back then. And Magnus, as he does often, sidesteps and plays g3, a sideline. Knight c6, bishop g2, d5, and this is all some theory. E takes d5. This isn't quite like a King's Indian attack. You can't play d3 or something. E takes d5, e takes d5, and castles. It's just an easy to play line as white. Black plays knight f6, developing, and d4. And I think both players were aiming for this position, but a guy like Magnus is not complaining about this structure because we're very close to an isolated pawn position. If black takes on d4, right here he is left with an isolated pawn, which requires some serious handling. Most people are more comfortable playing against an isolated pawn. Black played bishop e7. I'll just say, taking on d4, not ideal to just help white get that knight there. And bishop e7 is not a bad move because white can take advantage of it by trying to win a tempo, rook e1 check or something. There's moves like bishop e6. And black gets very active with his bishop on c5. So it's not necessarily a benefit for white to win that tempo. I can give an example, knight g5, and you just ignore it in castle. And there's these discovered checks against f2 coming if you go greedy and try to take that pawn on e6. The bishop is good on c5. So Magnus plays bishop e3. Now he's trying to take on c5. So now pawn takes d4, knight takes d4, and bishop g4. Why is a move like bishop g4 played? I mean, is it really gaining a tempo, or is it actually giving, can white just play f3 here or something, or gain a move? Why is such a thin move, just a one move threat like bishop g4 played? So bishop g4 is really developing with tempo, because white's not going to hit that back and play f3. So f3, bishop d7. And black will castle, but that f3 is not looking too sharp. So Magnus plays queen d3, queen d7. Black doesn't have to castle right away. White doesn't have some sort of rook e1 check or something here. So it has a little bit of time. Queen d7. If you don't play queen d7 right now, why did Anand play queen d7 before castling? Can somebody show me a move order benefit to that? Yes, Arjun?
But might be able to play h3, king h2.
Yeah, exactly. h3 can be played. Let's say you castle, you can play h3 now. And now the bishop has to pick a diagonal, but it's nice to get the queen and bishop on the same diagonal, and now that's no longer really a good possibility. You'd have to play bishop d7, but queen c8 is not as attractive as queen d7. The rooks aren't connected. White can play king h2. So black stands to gain more by playing queen d7 first, because there's no way white can stop black from castling, so that bishop is quite annoying on g4. It cuts off d1, bishop h3 is a threat, try to trade off that fianchetto bishop. And so that's a precise move order. Knight to d2. Knight c3 was also possible, just a developing move. And we just have a very simple, honestly, not a very theoretical position, but it still has, you know, strategical ideas here. But, you know, usually Magnus is quite happy to have these positions. He has a chance of an advantage. That isolated pawn can definitely be a bad thing. Can somebody explain why knight d2 instead of knight c3? Why white did that? Specifically because black has an isolated pawn. Why knight d2? What are you normally? Sorry.
I assume you'd rather have a knight on d4 than New York piece. And I guess this allows you to reinforce it, you know, d3 or
Exactly. He said, you know, you want to reinforce d4. A good way to deal with isolated pawns is to blockade them. That knight on d4 is doing a good job there, and now the knight on d2 can go to f3 or to b3 and reinforce that. Because if you blockade an isolated pawn, they can't trade it off. So that's why white went knight d2, because knight c3 is also in the cards. Castle. Knight d to f3. Rook fe8. You know, maybe the bishop will go to f8 or something, but that e-file has some, there's going to be some action there. Rook fe1. Bishop d6. So now bishop h3 might be playable. Is anybody tempted to take on c6? And if so, why? I'm just curious. No, yeah, but that's probably good. Usually you do wanna better to play against an isolated pawn. But the thing is, Anand is doing a good job here. He's not trading off. It would be a big mistake for black to take on d4. That just helps white. White can then take back with the knight and have the bishop on g2 doing something. The more pieces on the board, it's harder for white to just play positionally against that pawn. There's tactics to worry about. So often when you have an isolated pawn, you want to keep more pieces on the board. Magnus plays c3. He plays these natural moves all the time, just nothing special, but keeps attention. As long as the structure stays the same, white's always the one trying to push, because the end games will be better for white. So black has to be sharp. Anand played h6, and what I'm wondering is, he had the option of maybe getting some position like bishop h3. But there's a variation, even in this position. Probably bishop takes h3, queen takes h3, and something like queen f5, and just go for that slightly better endgame. If you play like knight g4, trying to checkmate, this move is really annoying, with the threat of queen takes f7 check and knight g5. And queen takes d5 is also a threat here, so there's a couple moves, but there's no checkmate for black. So I mean, I think objectively black is supposed to take on f5, and this is a sort of position that is going to favor favor white. Yep. So Anand has to be careful to not trade off too many pieces, which is why he's not taking on d4. So h6, just a waiting move. It's funny, a move like knight e4, he didn't play it as well. And here, yeah, knight e4 would also be possible, just to try to get the pieces into the game, follow up with rook a to d8. Play actively. Although even here, I tend to believe white is happy to play this sort of position. But it's a bit messy. It's a bit messy for sure. But he plays h6. Asking white, what are you going to do as white to improve your position here? Because it's really annoying for white that this bishop isn't in the game right now. I mean, white really wants to provoke some sort of knight takes d4 and clarify the position. But it's not possible right now. Magnus plays queen to f1, so that he can play h3. What's a decent move for black after queen f1? Somebody play for black here. I have to ask one thing. Is anybody tempted to play knight takes d4? No? That's very good. We have to avoid mistakes. That's exactly what he thrives on. Small. Knight d4, bishop takes f3, trades? No. Knight e5? No. If anybody's thinking about knight e5, no. Knight e5 as well. Makes life much easier for white. Just trading pieces off. Maybe h3 now, but makes it much easier to figure out the position and start focusing on d5. Maybe queen b5 next. In fact, probably I play a move like queen b5 and just try to trade and leverage that. So yes, play a move that keeps the tension. Queen f1. You played bishop h5. But rook c8 I can't complain about. Maybe even rook d8 as decent moves. You just have to not panic here, kind of, keep the position. h3. Still plays h3. There's no knight g4. But it's like typical, like he just wants to test black. Black, as long as black is playing decent moves, the position is okay. But there are every single move. There's a couple moves that can lead to annoying positions. They haven't been played yet so far. So far Anand's been up to task. Bishop g6. Rook a to d1. Pretty self-explanatory there. Make sure nobody's wanting to trade off pieces. That will help white. Rook a d8. Just getting the last rook into the game, copying white. But now you probably have to come up with a plan for black pretty soon. It was in this position that Magnus finally decides to take on c6. What caused that? Why now? Why is white doing knight takes c6 now? I'm not saying because it's a good thing, but
he can play c4.
He can play c4. He can play this position. What he did was definitely playable. But I mean, here I think white was waiting for black to do something. Black has played as many. White's run out of useful moves. I mean, white's played h3, brought the rooks in, the queen is on f1. There aren't too many more waiting moves that make any sense. You can play king h2, but that puts your king on the same square as the bishop on d6. So the question is is for a lower rated player, is that enough? I mean, usually they say you need two weaknesses. So, I mean, even for Magnus, isolate a pawn is something, but he usually does need to find a bit more. I mean, it's not that he wins because of isolated pawn. He wins because he gets a good position because of isolated pawn, and then they crack under. Not because they're losing yet. They make mistakes once they're just in an uncomfortable position. So an isolated pawn itself is not enough. no matter who you are. But he plays the positions very well. They're easier to play, and then people make more mistakes at compounds. But it's not the only factor. Don't if you have a really good position and you see a way to force an isolated pawn, so you give up your good position to get an isolated pawn. No. I'm not. No. Don't necessarily do that. But white's kind of run out of useful moves here. Rook e1 was useful, but now what are you going to rook e2, rook d2? They're all. He decides to play knight c6. What's black's obvious reply here? B takes c6. Oh, nobody's playing queen takes c6. B takes c6. It's no longer isolated. It's still not perfect pawn structure, but it's an improvement towards the center. So now the game transitions to a different structure, and now Magnus plays accordingly. c4. It's still a little bit easier to play for white. It's still a riskier pawn structure for black. I mean, there's an isolated pawn on a7. c6 could be weak, but there's just more targets. White's pretty defensive right now. Bishop e4 was played. Makes sense. Just challenge that fianchetto bishop. Okay, objectively the position has been equal. It's just he's trying to find a way to make it a little bit of a pull. This is bishop to d4. Play for black here, guys. Bishop d4. Simple chess from white, just still waiting, fishing for something. Ooh. Thanks for the suggestion, because that's exactly what I want to go over. Trying to make a draw against Magnus, and the suggestion was bishop f3, rook takes e1, and rook e8. That's not going to turn out well. There are a few different. First of all, if you were just to take this as is, knight e8 or queen e8, white's better. Two bishops, open position, clearly better. And if you're going to draw this, you're going to suffer for a long time. Although I don't think it's even, even quite isolated. Two isolated pawns, bishops open position, much better for white. And there's no way to force the pieces off, so not good. On the second hand, you have to be willing to defend this type of structure. And I'm not sure, I don't know too many people who like to play this structure. This is also unpleasant, although you can hold this, you can torture with king g2. This is just double isolated pawns on the f file are not good. But the other line is better. Two bishops, you cannot just force the issue there, unfortunately. That would be exactly where his technique in good positions is very good. I mean, he doesn't have an issue there, but two bishops, no. Bishop f3, big no-no. Any other moves, guys? Just bishop d4. These are all moves that white can play without thinking too much. That's something, I don't know if you guys have noticed, not a very confrontational position. For the most part, it's been natural moves. I think after queen f5, probably I'll just play with tempo. Knight h4. Your queen has to be close to the knight on f6. You're running out of squares. I'm not sure you can play queen e6 and put your queen and bishop on the same file. If you have to start making moves like this, the queen's starting to get hunted down a little bit. Although it may not be something. But I might even be, quite honestly, I might even be a greedy guy and just take that pawn with I might just take that pawn shamelessly, with the idea of rook a8, bishop all the way back to e3. So I'm not sure. I don't think you can do that. I think knight h4 and white's now all of a sudden better, like actually better. Just don't blunder, guys. I'm pretending to be Magnus, just waiting for mistakes. So bishop e4 makes sense. Bishop d4. How can this move be so strong? Just find a decent move for black here. Knight h7. Knight h7. Yes. Knight h7. Knight might come to g5, but it's just, you know, there aren't too many other attractive moves. Rook e6 maybe was playable. I'm not entirely sold on it, but I don't see something wrong with it right away. But knight h7. No way to blunder with that. And then knight might become to g5. There might be ideas of bishop f3, knight g5. Now Magnus decided to take on d5. I want to note c5 and playing these type of structures is probably not a good thing. Black would be very happy to close that position and now probably start to expand or play f5 or something, but closing the position isn't in white's best interest. d5 is more of a target. Once you play c5, you're not really putting pressure anymore.
Why would you create a pass pawn for black?
After c5?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the idea would be to maybe make your own b4, a4, and b5. Because you have the pass pawn blocked, and it looks like it's going to be blocked. Well, maybe not entirely, maybe knight f8, knight e6, but it is comfortably blocked right now. Sometimes people, you know, they'll play a4, b5, try to do the outside attack. But yeah, it's not the best. Knight h7. C takes d5. Question, c takes d5 or bishop takes d5? Well, c takes is a pass pawn, but isolated pawns are usually pass pawns, and people are happy to get rid of them. So it's definitely an option. It's definitely an option. I think what Vishy did here was quite accurate, and showed his. I mean, he was up to task that day. Let's say c takes. Okay, I play queen a6. Let me just show a typical position. Let's say bishop b8, bishop c3, and I'll say this position should be easier to play for white. We're starting to get the pressure on d5. Compared to before, one piece has been traded, pawns have been traded, and that pawn on d5 looks a lot more vulnerable than before. There's more tactics going on. The rooks are very effective on e1 and d1. And it seems to me like white's improved the position a bit more. Just visually, that, you know, knight is on h7, white's bishop is on c3, very nice square. Rook on d1 is doing something. Queen on a6. He did bishop takes d5. Thought that was a nice move. He evaluated the pawn on c6 to be better than having a pawn on d5. I think it was correct, really. I thought that last position is better for white. Now Magnus decided to trade a pair of rooks, just one pair, and play queen to d3. Now this position is still slightly preferable for white. That's because of the pawn structure, right? Like if everything else is equal, which it kind of is. I mean, at any moment, if white wants, you can probably trade off the bishop on d5, but usually you need more than a weakness to try to push. So It's close to equal, maybe slightly preferable for white. If they go into a pure endgame, that's something, but I don't think black needs to allow that. I was thinking maybe queen a6 again, just to be annoying.
Yeah.
But black is getting a ton of counterplay. I was looking at moves like this, and it's just with only one rook on the board, things get a little bit messier. F3 is hanging. I see why he didn't do that. He plays a bit safer. Queen to d3. But in none of these positions has there been an option for black to trade everything off and go for like that drawn endgame or something. If you have to maintain the balance here. If you go for something forcing, you still have two isolated pawns on c6 and a7. Knight f8, transferring the knight to e6. Now tell me, what about knight g5? Or is knight g5? Is knight g5 a move? Is there bishop f3 or something? Like any other move? Is knight g5 possible here? Yeah, it just trades off some pieces. It attacks h3, but yeah. Knight g5 probably not wild tempting and probably playable. Still, white should be on the good side of things. Just after king g2. Probably just after king g2, you're going to pull your bishop back to e3 and just put pressure on black. It's still not anything spectacular, but black is the only one suffering here. So knight f8, knight h4. So knight h4 is going to knight f5, f5 square. Any moves for black here, guys? Play a good move for black here. Position starts getting a bit trickier now after knight h4 because that's an aggressive move. There's quite a few ways to go wrong now. Okay, there's a few ways to go wrong here. But he plays a nice move actually. Bishop to e5, but already somehow, okay, I mean, I feel like white's still, I think all of us would take white. Which is why Magnus is dangerous. He can take like these basic positions that theory says are equal, but get a little bit of a pull in an equal position that the computers won't acknowledge, but that humans kind of will have troubles with. So bishop e5 was played. Again, do not trade. Trading very bad. Getting it, well, not very bad, but unpleasant. I mean, clarifying the position. Like now, something like bishop e5. This endgame should be comfortable for white. I'm not an endgame master per se, but let's say queen takes queen, rook takes. Objectively speaking, it should be white with the edge here. Maybe rook a3, a5, and trying to attack. I mean, put the pressure on those double pawns. Maybe get that knight to attack. But if you lose that a5 pawn, this is a very bad endgame. Maybe rook d5, but okay, it's not a nice endgame. So bishop e5 was played. Now Magnus had one move that I thought he could have gone for. But so far, like no moves that white has played have been conceptually too hard. This is just one of his games. I just want to test black in a well-known structure. Bishop e5. Offering a trade. Magnus took on d5 here and wanted to trade off pieces. Now I thought this might have been the one chance in the game, or one of the chances where after bishop e5, take on bishop takes e5, Rook takes e5 and f4. But okay, maybe rook e8 and knight f5. Some position like this. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, maybe white can play for a little bit of something here. It looks better for white, but the king is not as safe it's not that safe on g1. Or at least I'm not that happy to trade everything off just to win a pawn if my king is really naked. But just an example, I'll play queen e6. Something like rook d2. This is the type of way white has to play this. Keep the isolated pawn, keep the piece on the board. Okay, you can't take this pawn.
Why can't you take?
That's a good question. Why can't you take? That's a good question. Why can't you take the pawn? But I was just looking at this position, and I could see, this is a type of slightly better position you can still aim for and have very little risk as white. Why can't you take on d5? That's a little puzzle. Not saying it's a blunder, but it hurts white's winning chances. Queen takes d5. Queen b6 check. Attacking the pawn and the king. Queen d4. And now you get actually I thought there was rook e1, but the knight's protecting it. I thought there was rook e1. I was about to give up. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. So I might. Oh, ooh.
Oh, ouch.
I was about to blunder. I was like, they're both the same idea, but massive difference. I think this is the issue. And then game over. So that's a neat little tactic, but some position like this is still a little bit better for white because of the structure, but yeah, he didn't go for that. He went for just the pure endgame. Bishop e5, sorry, bishop d5, queen d5. Again, queen takes e5 here. Not queen takes queen. He's not going for this. I like how Anand played this game, which is one of the reasons why I'm showing it. Just this game has a lot to do more with defensive, playing good in a slightly worse position. This position also could be suffering for black. He evaluated the queens on as easier to draw. Magnus plays b3 now. Just defending, solid move. Knight e6, bringing the piece in. I mean, keep in mind, you don't want to just blatantly trade queens here because now this might be a better version for black if you get the rook really fast like that. So b3, knight e6, and knight f3, bringing the knight back into the game. Now I like this part. Queen f6. What did Magnus play here? I think a lot of you guys would play the same move. Keep it simple. Queen d7 is a losing move.
No, I can see. Oh, no, sorry. All right.
Just a simple move. King g2. Just king g2. Rook d8, queen e2. Anybody here, rook takes d1? Trade rooks, trade everything, make draw. Black is worse, king position. What did black play here? If any moment you guys see a variation that you think black can make a draw or like hold the position, then we'll look at that. But I think there's always a little bit of tension. That's what he tries to keep. Rook d5. Rook d5. You do rook d1. c6 I think is worse than d5. Let's say this position. Maybe something like queen d8, maybe. But it's also, there could be some ways to push this. But watch, so rook d5, with a plan in mind. So Magnus plays, rook takes d5, pawn takes d5. And this was an interesting moment. I was looking over this and I was like, well, those pawns are awfully weak on like a7 and stuff like that. Is anybody here tempted by queen a6 check? Sorry, queen a6? I want to play queen a6. Is anyone joining me?
Yeah.
You'll play queen a6?
No, I don't think there's something wrong with it.
Pardon me?
There's probably something wrong with it, because this isn't a good move.
You're with
No,
me?
you can check them.
Aww.
There you go.
I almost caught one person there.
F4 check.
Okay, you're right. Queen a6 is a bad move. So what about queen b5? We'll just play queen b5 together, right? Because then we're threatening queen d5 and we're threatening queen b8 check. Anybody playing queen b5 with me here? You are? Okay, that's good. We got one guy. Anyone else? No? Okay, well, I got one person, so that's enough. Yeah, I want to play queen b5. I mean, it'd be nice if white did have the time, you would want to play this, because isolated pawns should be attacked here. White's king is very safe. You could go pawn hunting, but unfortunately the two squares you want to go to run into tactics. You wanted to play, you just didn't put your hand up. But queen a6. But okay, it's still a position. It's still a little something. So knight, well, if you don't have that, knight e5, trying to get the pieces in. But Anand took the pawn on d5 instead of leaving one on c6, because I mean, this is now a passed pawn. They're both isolated pawns, but d5 is now a passed isolated pawn, so it's good and bad. But he read that as he'd rather have that than the pawn on c6. Queen f5. A cute little move. The queen is well placed on f5. It's watching on e4. The queen, white's queen, can't really go too far because there's queen e4 check. Knight d3. Anybody playing queen e4 check? Anyone tempted by queen e4 check here? You still giving black a chance to blunder. Queen e4 check, probably not good. Queen takes, maybe bring that knight to e5. And we're going to go to c6. We have the outside passed pawn, so it's still preferable for white. Still not a clear draw. So still no rushing it. Still no rushing it, even when you're like, oh, I almost got all the pieces straight off. Not so fast. Hmm? Ah, d4. d4 not played. I wonder why.
I mean, it seemed like queen f5 was sort of.
Maybe queen f3. d4 could have been played.
Yeah, not quite queen.
I think white would try to trade queens off in this position. Do you trade queens? No. As long as you don't trade queens, then nobody's messing up here, I think. Plays knight to d4. Because you can't play queen e5 here or something. And you have to watch f3. Well, we see why the d pawn is useful later on. g4. Well, queen d7. Now the point is, there's a lot of positions here where Anand can probably play a position and objectively it's a drawn, but he goes for whatever's easier for him. Like when there's all these different moves, play the position that you're kind of comfortable with. I mean, maybe this is actually a draw, but yeah, might have to find some precise moves. But practically speaking, if you keep the queens on the board, you retain perpetual possibilities. you have a piece to support that passed pawn, whereas with the queens off, that passed pawn is worse than the outside pawns for white. Like, so keeping the queens on the board ensures it's a lot harder to blunder.
Better endgame player than Magnus?
Who?
Is Vishy Anand better?
I think they're both very good. I think it comes down to who's a better. Probably Magnus might be a little better. Vishy played very good endgames in the candidates. When he had good positions, Vishy played very well. When he had bad positions, he played very badly. So his conversion was very good, but his defense wasn't so good in the recent candidates. So now it's like, you're black. Okay, let's say in a perfect world, white manages to get his queen on the queen side, tries to go pawn hunting. I'm just going to keep my queen in the center, and whenever you take on a7, I'm going to start checking you or something. Like, it's you know, all these weaknesses will tell. Queen e5, knight e6, king g3. Keep in mind, you can still get a worse position. If you play d4 here, it's not that easy. I might still be drawn, but I might start putting a bit of pressure as long as my king is safe. But he was playing for the queens the whole time. Queen b5. Knight f4. So in this position, do you want to trade queens as black? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Just double checking. Just double checking.
Is this what happened?
Yeah, this is what happened. I mean, because he does win a lot of games. People do make a blunder in the 5th hour of play. Sometimes your brain stops working and you do something you know you're not supposed to do. Queen b4 check. King f3. No more checks now. Play as black here. Like, it's an option of passive defense here or active defense. Pass pawn, king position. Black goes active, and I'd say, you know, if you play queen b7, I think it's okay. But
Just block the pawn.
block the pawn. Should still be a draw, but black was keeping the queens on the board, I think, for some active counterplay. He plays quite precisely here because he forces the draw. Let's put it that way, but not immediately. But king f3. I said that d pawn wasn't there for nothing. Because queen e8 check is a threat now, and you're not playing queen f8. d4. Right away. Because the queen on d2 also blocks the d pawn, right? You don't necessarily have to do it.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking if I allowed a king to approach, I might move it, but I guess you got a lot of checks if that's the case.
Queen e8 check. King h7. Queen takes f7. Any d3? Anybody?
Lose it.
No. Okay, that's good. No d3s. That's good. Queen d2. So we get to your position. Queen d2 is precise. Is precise. But what that means is you have to evaluate this position as being down a pawn, but no way for white to progress with that. Queen f5 check. King here. h4. I think the idea is to play g5 and g6.
Really? No.
Exactly. Yeah, look at that. Queen a2. Oh, you don't. Okay, you don't want to play queen takes a2. So we'll play d3, right?
D3 or check on D1, I can't decide which one. Yeah, something like this. Forward.
Push, right?
Last pawn must be pushed.
Passed pawns must be pushed.
And you can threaten
You
e8
play
rook,
queen
so-
d2?
You can play any move. You can play any move.
I agree.
Take it too slow.
I think it still works. Just push the pawn. What are you guys waiting for? I think d3 works as well, so
I think he can forward champ to basically.
everyone has a different way, but yeah, so d3, I mean, I don't think I'm missing something here. Yeah, unless g5 works, but I don't think it does.
There's no way bishop did not consider d3. A2 was there.
Queen takes a2, queen e6.
This is what was played?
This is what was played. It was just a draw though. But the d-pawn is way too dangerous. I think d3 does work. But there were a lot of possibilities for black to go wrong. I mean, it looks quite easy, the defensive house, but he read the position quite well, so it was a repetition in the end. But these are the type of positions Magnus regularly goes for, and the thing is he just doesn't lose very much, so he might win this 10% of the time, 15%, but that's still something. I mean, people make a blunder in the middle of the game, like this is typical of his style. White's always the one who is better. White was always the one who had the better end game. And if you slip up in time trouble, or you get the queens off, or rook end game, it might be drawn, but you'll be suffering a bit, and then people cracked. But in this position, black didn't have to suffer. He always kept the balance, practically speaking, didn't have some sort of, defensive task here. Kept the queens on the board. That rook to d5 is important though. I think this, even here, you can slip up easily, even trying to play this. There are ways to, I think White would have had to trade queens. He could have traded everything off, because I think if you don't trade queens off here as queen d5, and I think black is okay. So I think queen d8 could have been possible, could still be drawn, but you're on the worst side of it. Whereas in the other variation, I think Magnus had to force a draw in the end because of the d-pawn. So there's different ways of doing it, but I wanted to look at this game because I was looking at, past World Championship matches of Magnus to see what he excels in, and he doesn't win a lot of games from the opening. He just tries to grind them out, and this is a grind that didn't, wasn't successful, but he still got something from nothing. Like, I don't think most of the moves are not beyond us or require a lot of work necessarily. I mean, he does have a lot of understanding. He's way better, but you see he's not going for the most forcing tactical variations. He just wants to get these slightly better positions. So I thought this would, these are the type of games that Sergei Karyakin, he'll have to be playing a consistent, defensive level like this or better, I think, to have a decent chance against Magnus this fall. Because there's no way to avoid these type of positions, because computers will just tell you this is fine for you, but you still have, like humans, have a much harder time defending these positions.